Golden light draped across the Whitmore estate's rooftop terrace, painting the marble tiles in honeyed warmth while soft strings hummed from hidden speakers. The air smelled of champagne and roses, and laughter floated like bubbles above the glittering crowd. But serenity shattered in an instant. Vanessa's sharp laughter sliced through the music like glass snapping underfoot. She lifted a manicured finger toward the young housekeeper, hunched under the weight of an overstuffed black trash bag. Noah Hale's shoulders curved from the strain, his uniform damp at the collar, yet his steps stayed careful so the bag wouldn't split. Vanessa's voice rang out, cold and cutting. "Your worth fits perfectly inside that bag." The words hung like smoke, acrid and heavy. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze halfway to painted lips. Even the breeze seemed to pause. Noah halted, stunned. His eyes flickered with something raw, something wounded, yet he kept his spine unbent. His lips pressed, shut as if to keep the hurt from spilling out where everyone could see. Slowly, without a word, he walked on, the soles of his shoes whispering against the polished stone as if carrying away the weight of every cruel gaze he had ever felt. Vanessa reclined back into her chair, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. Her diamond bracelet caught the sun as she raised her glass again, a mockery of a toast to her own cruelty. The faint smirk at her lips hinted she expected applause for what she thought was wit. She never noticed Andreas Whitmore standing behind her, perfectly still, as though carved from the same marble beneath their feet. The young billionaire's tailored suit clung sharp against the breeze, but his expression had darkened, his heartbeat thundering with the weight of something unspoken. His jaw tightened like stone. To everyone else, Noah was only the housekeeper carrying refuse away. To Andreas, watching from the shadows, it looked as though someone had taken a blade to the soul of his home. The party had been designed to impress investors, to show elegance, control, and power. Yet in this single moment, all of it felt hollow. Beneath the gleam of chandeliers and the careful laughter, a truth surfaced like a crack in glass. They saw Noah as furniture, as part of the scenery, disposable. Noah regained the terrace steps and paused only to adjust his grip, not daring to lift his head, not daring to let them see how much her words had landed. But his silence spoke louder than her cruelty. It filled the golden afternoon like a hymn of endurance. Andreas's eyes followed him with a strange ache building in his chest. He thought of the early mornings when he passed Noah sweeping the halls before dawn, of how the lights were always on in the staff quarters when the rest of the house slept, of how this man had quietly held the house together through storms both literal and human. He thought of how easily they erased him with a single sneer. The terrace returned to its false chatter, but it rang hollow, like glass clinking in an empty room. Andreas stayed rooted, staring at the spot Noah had just stood, realizing that luxury without humanity was just a mausoleum. Somewhere deep inside him, something shifted. If you believe dignity is not measured in titles or wealth, but in how we carry ourselves through cruelty, follow Heart Stories to witness what happens next when kindness stands up to arrogance. Noah set the swollen bag of trash down beside the service cart with care, as if it were something fragile despite the stench clinging to its seams. He straightened for the first time all afternoon, rolling his sore shoulders back, and lifted his head. The chatter dimmed again, softer this time, like the air itself had grown cautious. His gaze swept over the terrace, not to challenge, but to be seen as though reclaiming a presence they had tried to erase. His voice arrived quiet, almost hesitant at first, yet carried across the stillness with disarming clarity. "Maybe I am worthless to you," he said, each word trembling, yet anchored. "But every morning I wake before the sun to open these shutters so the light reaches this place. I polish the banisters so the children who visit won't get splinters. I check the locks each night so strangers cannot walk through your laughter. This house glows because someone cares enough to keep it from fading. I don't deserve to be treated like garbage." The statement cracked through the warm air like the first drop of rain on parched soil. It was not loud, not angry, but it made every jeweled guest flinch inward. as if they had suddenly glimpsed themselves in an unflattering mirror. Vanessa's expression hardened, the amusement draining from her face until only annoyance remained. She drew herself taller, lips curled in disdain, voice rising like a blade unsheathed. "You dare talk back. You're only the help. Learn your place, Wamas." The venom slid into the open like smoke from a snuffed candle, souring what was left of the evening glow. Conversations dissolved into awkward silence. A man near the bar lowered his glass and stared at the floor. A woman in a gold dress shifted behind her fan as though to hide from the words that had already scorched the air. Noah didn't move, his fingers curled briefly at his sides, the tendons straining, but his eyes didn't drop. He stood inside the circle of their judgment, like someone standing in the center of a storm, steady though the wind tore at his edges. He had been called lesser before, had been whispered about in corners when they thought he couldn't hear, but hearing it laid bare like this, public, deliberate. Venom wrapped in silk pressed into him with a new sharpness. Andreas hadn't spoken yet. He remained against the railing, eyes unreadable beneath the fading sun. His silence did not shield Vanessa, though she seemed to expect it. Instead, it gathered weight, heavy and taut as a held breath. Several guests began adjusting their jackets or smoothing their skirts, unable to meet Noah's gaze. They had come to this terrace to be entertained, to sip luxury like it was proof of their worth. Now the air tasted bitter. They were witnessing cruelty stripped of disguise, and it unsettled them because it was familiar, because they had smiled at it before. Noah's chest rose and fell as though each breath scraped him raw, but he stayed, refusing to shrink. He didn't offer excuses, didn't plead for understanding. He simply stood tall enough to be human. In that silence, the architecture of hierarchy trembled. The line that separated the guests from the staff blurred for an instant, and some part of them recoiled at how easily it could dissolve. The terrace, moments ago gilded with confidence, now sat steeped in unease. Their gazes slid away not out of boredom, but shame, a shame that belonged not to Noah, but to themselves for letting cruelty echo this long before anyone had the courage to answer it. What lingered after his words wasn't defiance, it was dignity. And dignity, once spoken aloud, makes the cruelty around it look small. Vanessa's painted smile twitched as silence clung to the terrace like damp cloth. She blinked, then reached for the stem of her glass, fingers trembling almost imperceptibly. When she turned, her eyes sought Andreas with the desperation of someone trying to anchor herself in a room she no longer controlled. She tilted her head, voice sugar-coated, brittle around the edges. "Oh, come on, I was only joking. You know me, Andreas." But Andreas did not move. He stood at the threshold between shadow and fading sunlight, his expression carved in quiet fury. The muscles in his jaw flickered, but he offered no reply. The breeze toyed with the hem of his jacket as if testing the stillness around him. But it found no give. Vanessa's nervous laugh faltered in the hollow air. The sound didn't catch. It fell like broken glass. A thread of panic flashed through her face before she could hide it. Then she stepped toward him and brushed her hand against his sleeve as though proximity could soften judgment. "Say something," she whispered, though the words barely rose above the hum of the string quartet. And then he did. His voice arrived low and steady, yet it rolled across the terrace with the finality of a thunderclap. "Enough, Vanessa." The string quartet stopped. No one stirred. Even the fountain's trickle seemed to pause. Andreas's eyes locked on hers, a depth she had never bothered to look into until it was too late. "That wasn't a joke," he said. "That was cruelty. If you can't see the difference, maybe you never knew who I am at all." Each word landed like iron. Ripples of unease spread through the crowd, guests shifting but not daring to speak. Their gazes darted between Vanessa and Andreas, between power exposed and power dissolving. The image of her as the untouchable fiancée, the woman wrapped in diamonds at the arm of wealth, began to crack like porcelain. Vanessa's lips parted in disbelief, her face a kaleidoscope of outrage and fear. "You're defending him. He's just..." She caught herself. the word housekeeper almost spitting out like poison. I am your fiancé. The title hung between them, sharp and desperate, like a lifeline she assumed he would catch. Andreas did not. His gaze didn't waver. You will never be my fiancé, he said, each syllable clean and cold. If your heart is this empty. It was not shouted. It didn't need to be. It carried the gravity of something immovable. A murmur rippled through the guests like the first stirrings of wind before a storm. A man in a tailored navy suit exhaled softly, as though releasing something he had held too long. A woman with a jeweled brooch gave the faintest nod, almost imperceptible, like she had been waiting for this fracture to appear all along. Vanessa's hand fell from Andreas's sleeve as though it no longer recognized its purpose. She stood suspended in the aftermath, her posture immaculate, but her composure splintered. The vanity that had wrapped around her like silk now felt paper-thin under the weight of their watching. Andreas turned slightly, not toward Noah, but away from Vanessa. And in that small motion, she saw the truth: she was no longer part of the orbit she had once commanded. What collapsed that night wasn't just a relationship. It was the illusion that cruelty could be masked as charm forever. Some masks fall quietly. Others shatter loudly enough that everyone remembers where they were when it happened. And sometimes, the silence after their fall is the loudest sound of all, a reminder that integrity will never need a mask to be seen. Vanessa's heel struck the stone once, twice, then faded into nothing as she fled the terrace. The echo of her departure lingered like the ghost of an old song, sharp and fleeting, until it, too, dissolved into the evening air. She didn't look back. No one reached for her. The doors swung closed behind her with a muted click, severing the last thread of her presence from the gathering she had once ruled. For a moment, silence draped over everything. The string quartet remained frozen mid-measure, bows suspended as if afraid to cut through the fragile stillness. The guests shifted, awkward and unsure, their eyes darting anywhere but the young man standing near the service cart, with his hands still faintly trembling. Andreas moved first, not with grandeur or spectacle, but with a quietness that made people straighten instinctively, as though something sacred were unfolding. He crossed the space between them in measured steps, each one deliberate, each one stripping away the invisible wall that had always separated host from staff, wealth from labor, power from humility. Noah stood still, his posture taut, as if bracing for whatever came next. He had spent years enduring the aftermath of cruelty, silence, avoidance, the soft apologies meant only to soothe guilt, never to mend harm. He expected nothing more, but Andreas stopped in front of him and, without a word, gently took the heavy bag from Noah's hands. The plastic crinkled softly as Andreas set it aside. Then he looked at Noah, not at the uniform, not at the bowed shoulders, but at him. No one will ever treat you like that again, Andreas said, his voice low, steady, carrying not just promise, but conviction. You kept this place alive. Not the marble, not the chandeliers, not the parties. You. The words struck with the force of something long overdue. They peeled away the thin veneer of hierarchy that had coated the terrace for years, exposing something raw beneath recognition. A slow, uncertain rustle moved through the crowd. One pair of hands began to clap. Tentative at first, then another joined, and another, until the sound swelled like a rising tide. It washed over the terrace in waves of release. Clapping that was not for performance or spectacle, but for relief, for the simple justice of seeing humanity acknowledged aloud. Noah's chin dipped, his breath catching against the sudden warmth pressing in from all sides. The applause blurred into a single hum as moisture welled at the corners of his eyes. For so long, he had existed as part of the background, maintaining beauty while never being considered part of it. Now, for a fleeting, breathtaking moment, the light touched him directly. Andreas didn't smile. He simply remained there, shoulder to shoulder with Noah, while the applause ebbed and quiet returned like the sea after a storm. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't spectacle. It was restoration. The terrace looked the same, the marble still gleamed. The The chandeliers still caught the dying light, but the air had shifted. It felt lighter, as though some hidden weight had been lifted from the bones of the house. Even the guests stood differently now, spines less rigid, expressions softened by something almost like relief. In that hush, the lesson unfurled quietly between them. Dignity does not ask for grandeur to be real. It only needs to be seen. When it finally is, it changes not just the one who receives it, but everyone who witnesses the seeing. Days slipped quietly past the terrace incident. Though its echo still clung to the edges of the Whitmore estate, the parties stopped. The laughter stopped. Vanessa stopped coming. Where there had once been a carousel of luxury cars lined along the drive, now there was only silence broken by the occasional hum of lawn sprinklers. She had left in a swirl of wounded pride, vanishing into the city's noise. But she had not surrendered. In a sleek downtown office bathed in sterile light, Vanessa sat across from her attorney with her chin lifted high, posture wrapped tight around her arrogance like armor. She spoke of Andreas as if he were property, as if the man she had once tried to decorate herself with was still an accessory waiting to be claimed. She demanded division of assets, convinced there existed some unspoken contract, some secret registry of their bond that would confirm she had once stood at his side, not as an ornament, but as an heir. The attorney moved through the digital files with the slow gravity of someone peeling back layers of history. Lines of text scrolled across the screen in pale blue light, and then the scrolling stopped. Silence swelled until it drowned the buzz of the air conditioner. The attorney blinked, leaned closer, then sat back, eyes flicking up at her with something between disbelief and caution. Vanessa frowned. "Well, show me the numbers." The screen turned. Her own reflection stared back at her from the glass as the words glimmered beneath it. Andreas Whitmore had not bound his estate to her. He had severed it from himself. Months before the terrace party, before her cruelty had unraveled in front of the world, Andreas had signed every deed, every account, every tangible remnant of wealth, and transferred them into a charitable foundation. A foundation under the stewardship of one man, Noah Hale. The name sat like a quiet bell in the middle of the room. Vanessa's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Color drained from her cheeks, leaving her as pale as the white leather chair beneath her. The attorney waited, impassive, as though giving her space to comprehend the shape of her own downfall. She rose too quickly, the legs of her chair shrieking against the tile, and stumbled toward the door without a word. Pride had always been her crown. Now it hung in tatters, dragging behind her as she vanished from the office like smoke curling away from cold embers. While she unraveled, life at the Whitmore estate moved with unassuming steadiness. Noah continued his quiet routines, polishing railings, checking locks, coaxing life back into the gardens that had withered under years of neglect. But now, when he walked the halls, people looked at him, truly looked, and nodded with something close to reverence. One morning, the legal courier arrived with the final documents. Noah stood alone in the study when he unfolded the parchment. The ink glistened like black glass under the sun, the signature unmistakable. Andreas's handwriting curved with precision, steady even in farewell. At the bottom, a single line waited like a heartbeat. The only person who ever made this house a home is him. Noah's hands trembled. He pressed his thumb over the small rainbow pin on his chest until its metal edge bit into his skin. Not as proof of victory, but as proof of survival. He did not smile, did not bask in triumph. He simply let out a long, quiet breath, as though setting down a weight he had carried too far for too long. Because worth was never measured by who sat at the top of the marble stairs. It was measured by who kept the lights glowing when everyone else left. Do you believe kindness can outlast cruelty and rebuild what arrogance tries to burn down? If you do, comment, respect, and follow Heart Stories to keep this light alive.